All right, good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, and I just want to go over a couple of problems with you. And to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be doing today, it's basically the exact opposite of what we did yesterday. So if you remember what we did yesterday, basically I would give you the equations, you would factor it into factors, then you'd put each factor equal to 0, and you would then solve and get what all the zeros are, which were the x-intercepts. Today we're going to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to start with the zeros right here, the x-intercepts. And so here are my four x-intercepts, -2, -1, 1, and 2. And this is what the graph of the equation that has those zeros or x-intercepts look like. What we want to do is we want to come up with the polynomial equation. So if you think about what we did yesterday, as I mentioned, the first thing we did was factor. Then we put the factors equal to 0, and then we solved, and we got x equals whatever we have. So going backwards, the first thing that we have here is our zeros right here. So really, what does that mean? That means that x equals -2. I'm trying to think of where I want to write it. So x equals -1, x equals 1, and then x equals 2. So that's what we always ended up with. Now working backwards, the next thing we had was a bunch of factors. So we had a bunch of stuff in parentheses equal to 0. Well, how do I take each one of these and rewrite it so it's equal to 0? Well, it's really a straightforward process. For this one, I simply add 2 to both sides, and I get x plus 2. I do the same thing over here. I add 1 to both sides, and we get x plus 1. Oh, and these are equal to 0 now. Equal to 0. And I take 1 away from both of these, and I get x minus 1 equals 0. And same thing, take 2 away, and I get x minus 2 equals 0. Now, each of those four things that I just computed, my x plus 2, my x plus 1, my x minus 1, and my x minus 2. Those are my factors. Okay, so just like if I had factored this problem. Now what we want to do, if you think about moving backwards from yesterday, we have our factors, and I'm going to rewrite them right here. X plus 2, and I'm going to put the x plus 2 and x minus 2 next to each other. And I'm going to put my x plus 1 and my x minus 1. So there's my factored form. How do I end up with my polynomial now? Well, if you think about the of factoring and what the opposite of factoring is, the opposite of factoring is multiplication. So basically what you need to do is you need to multiply those four things together. And so what I would recommend is that you pick 2 and multiply them, and pick 2 and multiply them. So how do we multiply these things? We get out our old friend Mr. Magic Squares, or Mrs. Magic Squares. I'm an equal opportunity magic squarer. All right, so set that one up. We're going to get x squared, 2x, -2x, and -4. So when I take those two things out of there, this one I get x squared minus 4, like that. And then this one I get x squared minus 1. And so you see why I picked them in this fashion. So anytime you got a plus or a minus, you know that those two terms right there are going to cancel out. And similarly right there, those two terms cancel out. And now what I need to do is I need to multiply those two together. So it's magic square palooza. All right, so we set that up like that. I put my x squared minus 4, I put my x squared minus 1, and I get x to the 4th. I get -4x to the 2nd. I get -1x to the 2nd, and I get +4. And so then I go ahead and pull that out, and I get x to the 4th from that one. -4 and -1 is -5x squared, and +4. Just for giggles, I want to check that and make sure that it matches. Oop, ignore that. So let's see what we get. We get x to the 4th minus 5x to the second, looking about the same, plus 4. And you can see, look at my zeros. -2, -1, 1, and 2. Okay? So a quick recap of the steps. We take our, we first take our zeros. So let's see, where can I write it? We take our zeros. So step 1, take zeros and rewrite as factors. Okay, there we go. Take zeros, rewrite as factors, and then my second step is to multiply the factors. Okay, so that's basically all we're doing today. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more where we have a fraction involved. So I guess we'll call this letter B. So there we go. So B. So let's say that we've got zeros of -1/2, 3, and 3. So let's write them as factors first of all. So if you think about what we did here on this previous problem, we had x equals -2, the factor is x plus 2, -1 plus 1, +1, -1. So to rewrite the factors, a quick shortcut, since that is that is a -1/2, my factor is going to be x plus +1/2, and then x minus 3, x minus 3. Okay? Now, the issue with this one is our fraction right here. We can't have a fraction in our factored form. So what we want to do is we want to basically take this right here. We want to get rid of the fraction. So there's two ways to look at it. So if I have this x plus 1/2, what I want to do is multiply just that one by 2. And if I multiply this by 2, I end up with 2x plus 1. Just doing the distributive property. Okay? So that's really what we're doing. Kind of a shortcut method to do that is to take this number that's the denominator of the fraction and just bring it out front. And so we have 2x plus 1, x minus 3, x minus 3. So here we have two factors, and basically what you need to do is you need to pick 2, multiply them together, and pick another 2, or take that answer and multiply it with the third one. So it doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick those 2 first. And so magic squares, magic squares. I should have been a singer. All right, so 2x and 1, x minus 3. 2x squared, 1x. -6x and -3. Okay? Yeah, that looks good. All right, so then I'm going to go... I'll just write it over here, and I'll put it in parentheses right away. 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. And the reason I put it in parentheses is because I got to go x minus 3. And multiply those two together. So big squares, just like the big Super Bowl squares. Hopefully somebody won some money. All right, so we got that. 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, x minus 3. So 2x cubed, negative 5x squared, negative 3x, negative 6x squared, 15x, and 9. Clean that all up, we get 2x to the third minus 11x squared plus 12x plus 9. And let's go ahead and graph that just to be safe. So, all right, 2x raised to the third minus 11x raised to the second plus 12x plus 9. All right, let's check our zeros. First zero is -1/2. Good. Notice here, we talked about this yesterday. If you notice, our original problem had 3 twice. Double root. Remember we talked about what happens in the graph of a double root. It bounces. Boom, notice right there. 3, 0. It hits the x-axis and bounces up. Okay. So this is a quick way to verify that your equation is correct. Make sure you hit the appropriate zeros, which we did in both places, this one being a double root. All right, go to your assignment, and it's on